All right. Welcome to the show. Mack Story is joining me today. The man started on the front lines of manufacturing in the late 1980s. He progressed into an expert in lean manufacturing. He also grew into a senior leader and then developed a passion for leadership and management. The guy's a savage. He's published a ton of books, over 10 books. He's going to tell us in a minute how many it was. I counted 10, 11, 12, something like that in my research. Um, uh, his business, Blue Collar Leadership, is highly sought after in both speaking and consulting. Mack Story, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks, Jake. Man, it was awesome to meet you out there in Boise, Idaho, and then find out you do this too. And you're like, "Hey, man, will you come on the podcast?" And like, absolutely. I mean, you're no doubt a go-getter, man. And I like talking to people like you because all I want to do is I always tell people I'm not trying to make a lot of dollars. I'm trying to make a lot of difference. And with you doing a podcast, there's no doubt you're trying to make a lot of difference as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're aligned in from that perspective, man. How many books are you at right now? Published books. I want to know.
Yeah, 14, and between my wife and I, we got 32, and she's 6 of those are journals. She's got motivational planning journals, and we
Yeah.
count them as books. I mean, they look like a book. And so between the two of us, 32. 2014, January 2014, we had 0.
Wow. 7 years, just distilling down some knowledge, some nuggets, some information for folks and framing it out. I got a funny story actually, though. I saw you speak at the Idaho Manufacturing Alliance, the IMA
Yep.
Conference that you were the featured keynote at here in Idaho. And we got these books, the 5 components for building high performance teams, right?
Yep.
And later that evening, it was funny. I went there with a couple of colleagues. I'm a nerd when it comes to, and we've talked about this a little bit, when it comes to process improvement. I love lean. I use in my consulting practice, I use and borrow a lot from those methodologies, those tools, the ways of approaching and solving problems. Not everybody is as enthusiastic as I am about that. And I actually, in this Christmas gift exchange, we kind of did like this, there was like a dollar cap and all this stuff that we put into it. But the gift that I ended up getting at this exchange was actually another copy of your book. That gal that I went there put in there. So I have 2 copies of this book. So if anybody's listening to this podcast, reach out. I will get you for sure a copy of the book. But I haven't read it yet. But I've got a feeling it's going to be information dense for me because it's, the way that you make it so simple and so practical on the way that we can approach leadership and process improvement. I find it fascinating. I love your website. So let's talk about that process. Let's talk about like when you started in this business, when you started on the lines of manufacturing, how long until you started to really gravitate toward process improvement or leadership as like a career?
Probably, I mean, I started in 1988 and probably was, I started getting introduced to lean probably around 2000, or excuse me, around 1995, but it wasn't really taught to us. I was just a machine operator out in a big manufacturing plant, and it was done the wrong way. It was done to us and not with us. They had corporate people. We were down in Alabama, and we had people from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, figuring out how to set up the plant and how to set up sales and do all that kind of stuff. And then they just, brought people in, set up the sales, and then just told us how to run them in a circle. Basically, they didn't really include us. But I was always interested in change. I loved all that. Most people in the plant hated all that was happening, but I loved it. And so fast forward into 2003, I was working at another company, and I was hired in there as a cost estimation engineer. And I did that for about a year, and then that need for that job went away. And then they trying to figure out what to do with me, and I became a process engineer. They didn't have that role in that company at the time, and so I started getting to play around, with improving processes. However I wanted to do it, it was up to me. Then basically around 2004-5 time period, the company, and it was a large, almost a $2 billion company with about 70 locations around the world, but they had never done lean before. They've been around since 1915, I think it was, but had never done lean. They were just traditional manufacturing, a multi-billion-dollar company. And we kind of got the edict passed out that we were going to become a lean company, and all the plants got given the mission to implement 5S. And so actually the leader wanted one of the formal authority managers to take over that process improvement, continuous improvement role. None of them wanted to do it. You know, the HR manager didn't want it. The engineering manager didn't want it. The production manager, all these managers that report to the plant manager, none of them wanted it. So I held up my hand and I was like, I'll do it. You know, I had never led lean before, but I was like, I love process improvement. So I was like, I'll do it. And so I set up, man, we had like 8 main departments, and I set up a 12-week, because they wouldn't give us like a lot of time to go do a Kaizen, you know, full-blown Kaizen event, kind of 5S event. So I just set up a 12-week program with 8 departments. We did 96 little micro 5S events with each one of them. Each one of them did an event. I started teaching them 5S. We started doing it. We'd get like 2 hours each week. And basically within 12 weeks, we had kind of done a real hardcore 5S. And then we found out they want to do everything else related to lean. You know, there's a lot more to lean than 5S, but that's the foundation. And so I held up my hand and said, I'll do it all as long as y'all let me read at work. And they let me read at work. I was also reading at home. And then basically fast forward 3 years, we went from -3% gross profit margin to plus 35% gross profit margin. But we had a plant manager switch in there that was critical. If that wouldn't have happened, I probably would have quit about as soon as I started, because I didn't like the way the other plant manager was leading. He's more of a dictator and a director. And then I guess because we were -3% gross profit margin, he got changed, and we got a new plant manager, and that guy come in and turned us loose, man.
Well, you know, you mentioned two lean terms already. Like, let's take a step back for folks who might not understand the methodology or the framework. So one of the things that you said was Kaizen or Kaizen event, and then also 5S. And so for in the spirit of just getting everybody to the same water level, explain both those things.
Yeah. So Kaizen is a word. It's a Japanese word. When you really learn about lean, Toyota's kind of started out and has been, probably still is, the world's lean benchmark as far as, you know, doing processes efficiently and effectively. And so a lot of the words are Japanese words. So a lot of people who do lean teach Japanese words. They use those words, even though you got to teach people what they mean instead of just using the English word, but that's just common. So Kaizen means, you know, continuous improvement in the simplest terms, but small change for the better. Take it apart, put it back together again. People say it all different kind of ways. And so Kaizen is just, it could be me improving something on my own by myself, small change for the better, right? That's the true Kaizen. When you got a true Kaizen culture, people are just constantly making changes and making improvements. They don't need somebody to tell them to. They don't need a consultant. They don't need a Kaizen event. You know, that's kind of like perfection, when you got everybody bought in and it's just happening. And or you can do a Kaizen event where it's a dedicated 1 day, 3 day, 5 day event. You bring a team of people in and you focus on making a change for the better. And 5S is one of the what we call lean tools. And you know all about this. I know I'm speaking to your audience who maybe don't know about it, or my audience when I share this podcast out to my audience. A lot of them maybe don't know about lean, but 5S is really about standardization and organization. Some people call it 6S, which is a safety, but my 5S still has safety in every one of the S's, whether I call it 6S or 5S. But it's all about, you know, it's sorts. I teach it backwards because in the context of continuous improvement, I teach 5S different than most people because I think they got it wrong in the beginning.
I can't wait till you say this, because I have always flipped 2 and 3.
Yep. I've always, it makes sense.
That whole, like, that sort, the set in order, the sweep, standardize, sustain.
Nobody takes sort, just for you folks, you know, you sort it out, get everything that doesn't belong out of the area and then normally people teach shine or sweep, which is clean. No, they teach it the other way, right? They teach it set in order. I'm going to my own way because that's what's in my brain. But normally people teach sort, and then set in order, organize everything that you have remaining, and then shine, which is clean, sweep, and paint. Nobody does that. People sort and get out what doesn't belong. Then they clean and paint and all that stuff. Then they set it back in order. So I always flip them. I ain't ever been afraid to flip them. Some people say, well, that ain't the way it goes. I'm like, it's the way it goes when I'm doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, if you can, I think you can get success either way. I mean, that's the thing, is like, how hypocritical it would be to not make minor improvements to a framework that's about making improvements. Like if it works for you, you know what I mean? Like, so everything is subject to process improvement except for the process improvement methodology. What do you like? What do you what do you mean? I've always tried to blend those tools into applications that they weren't traditionally meant for. I think that's so important. It opens up the lenses in which you look at the world through the eyes of improvement. Like I use Hoshin planning or whatever the policy deployment. Sometimes I don't cascade it. Sometimes I just use it as a scaffolding to gather information and set projects in order and find out who's accountable for stuff. That's fine.
Absolutely, man. And really what you're saying in my language, and before I say it, just to catch your listeners up, they said, well, you didn't give us the other two S's. So the other one is standardize and sustain. And sustain is why I really started to focus on leadership development, because that's really the key to buy-in and sustaining. But what you're talking about, what you just mentioned is from my frame of reference, I teach people, and when you heard me speak on leadership, I'm teaching principles, and lean was the same way. I teach principles, not practices. Like people who say, well, if I don't make cars, what Toyota does ain't gonna work here. What you see them doing may not work if you're not making cars, but what underlies what you saw them doing, the principles that allow them to be effective and efficient, those are principles apply everywhere, every single process there is. And that's what you're describing, is you taking the principles and you figuring out how to apply the principle that makes sense instead of just copying a practice. That's what a lot of people do. They copy the practice because they don't understand the principles.
Yeah. And, there's a couple of guys that, the reason I love lean so much, and for folks that are listening that might not know this about my career history, for about 2 years, I worked as an internal process improvement consultant for a hospital. And we had a unique opportunity to understudy former Toyota employees for 2 years that were there consulting and helping us get organized. So my job was literally to go learn about lean and then provide training. So we were all responsible for training everyone from executive leadership down to frontline employees on the core principles of lean, as well as leading and coaching people through performance excellence type activities. And it was a wonderful experience for me. A couple of guys, I'd like to shout people out. So Jerry Schultz, Dave Bowman, Greg Lorentz, they had so much to do with my learning and understanding. And it's a really fun process. But the thing that I underestimated with this, and I think that most people do, and I'd love your perspective on this. Like when you just went through the 5S's, that last one, sustain's a tough one. Sustain is the hardest part of the whole deal. Sustain is the reason that our garages need to be spring cleaned every year, because we don't have good process around where things go. Sustain is like why people have to continually reset their workout programs or their diet and exercise and those kinds of things, because the discipline of sustainment is such a hard thing, not just in your personal life, but when you go to work every day. How many times do people not, quote, follow the process that's designed? That's a deviation from sustainment. So like, I'd love to hear your perspective in coaching and leading people. How do you sustain?
Yeah, there's two, to me, there's two components of that. There's the personal leadership, like a lot of the stuff you just described at home, working out, your garage, there's no boss involved in that. It's me, right? So that's the foundation, is personal development. Discipline is giving yourself a command and following through on it. The other component is at work. And you touched on this, there's a design for the process, but then people don't follow it. And the number one reason that I think people don't follow a lot of it, because the people don't own the process. It's kind of like when I said people done it to us. As a consultant, when I was a consultant, from 2008 to 2012, I was doing lean consulting all over the country for mostly manufacturing companies. And my goal was always the team owned it, because if they own it, they'll sustain it. If I own it, if they may not sustain it. If I own it and they don't really like what I'm doing, they definitely ain't going to sustain it. They're going to make sure it doesn't work. So one of the leadership principles I always teach is lead with questions, not directions. But that's the key component, is, am I bought in? For instance, sometimes when I'm leading a Kaizen event, I can see, because I have a lot of experience, I can see maybe we start at A, and I can see we probably could make it to H, this week. If we're looking at the alphabet as a scale, we start at A, I see that we could get to H. But as I lead the team, they may only get to E. And if all they get to is E, that's where we stop. As soon as I push them to F, I own it. As soon as a big dog leader walks in and said, well, I thought y'all were going to do this, this, and this, and y'all need to figure out how to make that happen too during this week. So as soon as somebody pushes them past where they own it, whoever's pushing them past it owns it. And they're not going to put as much effort into owning it themselves when they don't want to own it, right? They wanted to go to where they wanted to stop. And I always tell people, whenever someone would come in and say that, I would never push them past that, not with directions. I may do it with questions, but when I do it with questions, they own it because it's their answer. I may know where I want them to go and they may not be going there, but I don't tell them to go there. I ask questions and ask, get them to thinking and get them to asking questions of each other. But sometimes the boss will come in and they'll push them past where they wanted to go. And they'll, before the boss comes in, they're leaned up, they're around the table. A lot of times we'd have a 3x4 magnetic table with a 1-inch grid, and we'd have everything in the plant cut out to scale so we can move a lot of stuff by hand and figure out stuff on a board before we go move it all around in the plant. So you ain't got to do event after event after event over time. We do like multiple events in 1 week because we do it on the board first. And so a lot of times they come, the team will be all proud of what they got. And they leaned over and they all bought in. The leader will come in, start telling them stuff. And when the leader walks out, they sitting there, arms crossed, laid back. They don't own it anymore. And so now I got to get them bought back in. So the first thing I'll tell them is, you guys are leading this team. Your guys are going to decide what happens. Yes, that person just walked in and they said a whole bunch of stuff. We ain't going to worry about it unless was anything they said that made sense. Let's talk about what they said. See, that's another question. Did anything they say make sense? That's a question. That ain't me saying, hey, what he said was important. We need to do that. Because as soon as I do that, I'm just like him.
Yeah.
I'm owning it. But I say, let's break it down. That may be in my direction, but really I'd probably say, would y'all like, let's break it down and figure out what he just said. And does it matter? If it doesn't matter, we'll throw it in the garbage and continue on. If it matters, we'll figure out if it applies, and he'll thank me awesome for sticking his idea in our event.
I can't help but think that in the times that we're in today, where we're having this great resignation that's happening across this country, that people who are empowered and motivated and feel ownership in the thing that they're doing, I don't know, that's probably a philosophy that organizations might want to look at right now and helping allow those individuals to kind of co-create some value in those processes. Like, what have you seen recently in chatting with some of these organizations?
And relative to what specifically, Jake?
Yeah, the great resignation is kind of happening right now, last 6 to 8 months. Any perspectives recently on organizations that maybe are asking for services around lean process improvement for the purpose of pushing the work down to the employees that are probably leaving?
Yeah, I don't really get that because I really don't do the lean, what people normally call lean these days, the continuous improvement. Most people who speak about lean, they're talking about the continuous improvement component. And for people who don't know, there's two components, right? Respect for the people and continuous improvement. Most people who talk about lean are really talking about continuous improvement. And then they try to throw in a little bit of respect for the people. But I call respect for the people growing and developing the people, everybody at every level, which is leadership development. That's what I really do today. So in my mind, I'm still doing lean, but I'm doing nothing but the respect for the people piece and letting other folks do the continuous improvement piece. And the reason is respect for the people is where the buy-in falls in. It's where the sustaining is bought into. It's where the question you asked me, all that comes from the respect for the people side. So I get a lot of people who are asking me for leadership development, personal growth for their team up and down, left and right, because that's really where I've focused since 2012. So I don't really do a lot of lean, but there's a few companies that I will do lean for, but they've got to prove that they want to do respect for the people the way that I understand it, meaning they got to go in and invest in developing the people first, because then they'll buy into lean. They don't even have to do lean to get massive improvements.
Yeah.
But as soon as they're bought in, if you'll introduce lean and give them a tool, it'd be like you ain't bought into building a house, but then you buy into me and then you buy into building a house, and now you're all excited, but you ain't got any tools. You'd try to do your best, but as soon as I give you some tools to build a house, the house just appears. And so that's that's why I shifted.
Yeah.
You know, it was a transition because I started studying leadership in 2008. It's when I started reading. I've been reading every day, but for 4 years I was doing the continuous improvement side of lean. But I got a book called Blue Collar Kaizen, Leading Lean and Lean Teams, and in there I literally talk about how did I implement leadership into all of my Kaizen events. Most of them were 5-day events. So what I would do is it's a lean principle, but it's also a leadership principle. I would go slow to go fast. First 4 hours on Monday morning, you know, a lot of times these plants were in crisis with their process or whatever, but I didn't start teaching lean tools. First 4 hours on Monday morning, I was teaching about personal growth and development and teamwork and leadership and all these principles. And I define leadership as influence. So that applies to everybody. How do we influence each other? How do we influence the boss, teammates, down the org chart, you know, everywhere. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I would do 1 hour. So basically 20% of my week, one whole day spread out a little bit, I dedicate to what I call priming the pump. I get them ready. After we do our 4 hours on Monday morning, they ready to tear out the gate. You know, when I walk in on Monday morning, they frustrated. They don't like change. They don't like me. They didn't like the last consultant. They don't like the boss. So in that context, I do get a lot of people asking for that. Actually, out in Idaho, I spoke on Thursday when you saw me speak, but on Wednesday I was at a plant, and I'll give them a shout out because they're some great folks, and they're diving into lean and leadership at the same time. It's Image National Signs out in Nampa.
Yeah.
And they first got interested. They heard me speak in Chicago, and I spoke on the culture book that you heard me talk about, but also spoke on my Kaizen book in another session, and they attended both sessions. And when they heard me speak about the Kaizen book, they figured out the true way to get started and make it really stick was the people, you know, developing the people. So then they came to the event, or they ordered 200 books and brought us out on Wednesday before we spoke where you were at the Idaho Manufacturing Alliance. And I talked there for 2 hours on leadership. It's awesome, man. You know, in the production world, hardly will they slow down for any minute to do any development of people. But Steve Watts, the president out there, he shut down the whole plant, about 150 people for 2 hours, set up chairs out in the shipping area or the receiving area. And we got to talk to him about how to lead yourself well, you know, how to be a high impact individual. And then I went and did a 2 hour, real brief, high overview of what lean is and help them start understanding what it means. And what's pretty awesome is Jade Hardman out there. He's a production manager over about 80 people. And he has launched into, he's just learning about lean and just learning about leadership, but he is so hungry. And Steve, the president, is hungry too. Lean's new to him as well. And this kind of leadership that I teach is new to him. And both of them together gung-ho about lean, but as they get further into it, they start to realize that the leadership is the key. I talked to Jay just a couple of days ago, and he's like, man, I've gung-ho about this continuous improvement, all the lean stuff. He said, but the more and more I get into it, I realize what you say is, got to get the people, the people bought in, got to get the people working good together, got to get trust built and all this kind of stuff. And then we can go do all the rest. And so he's kind of doing both, but he's realizing that the respect for the people piece is the key. And people say, there's a research study, I don't remember who's attributed to, but basically they say people who follow a leader because they want to are 40% more productive than people who follow a leader because they have to. And I think it's far greater than that based on my experience, but I go with the research, just say it's 40%. But I mean, how awesome would a 40% across the board improvement be for most organizations?
Well, I think that's how you go from a -3% to a positive 35, right?
It's almost 40%, right?
It's almost 40%. Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. You know, I can't help again to draw this analogy. I once sat through a training around change management. And it was like, you know, organizational change management, not like project change, but by an organization called ProSci. And they liken like projects and process improvement to the bricks and the people side of it as the mortar. And it's like, you can force them to put the bricks on top of the bricks, but if you're not binding it all together, if you're not making sure that the wall that you're building is sturdy from the bottom up, you might have a wall, but one that's easily pushed over once there's some adversity. So
absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. That's a good analogy.
Yeah. The other thing too is so you clearly made a pivot to focus on the people side of change. What books, like what inspired you? Like, where did you go to like really expand? So you had this great process improvement. You've seen the impacts of people who aren't bought in versus people that are. You go, oh, I got to pull this thread. I need to get closer to these people with my experience. Like, where did you go to kind of build that skill set?
Yeah. So initially, I said I was reading all these lean books, and the one that really was the catalyst for understanding it from a lean standpoint was the Toyota Way in the very
Yeah.
beginning when it talked about respect for people. But at that time, I never understood there was an entire industry, based on personal growth and leadership development that focused on what Toyota was talking about in the Toyota Way, respecting the people. But I think I do it at an entirely different level than what Toyota Way talks about. They, far as respect for the people, they do have a tremendous respect for the people, but I take it to an entirely different level. Toyota has respect for the people based on everything I've ever read. Is why do they do it? Is because they want high quality and they do want to respect the people, but why is the high quality, and efficiency in the process. I take it to another level of why do I want to respect the people? Because I want you to have a better life. I don't care where you have it, at home or at work or at another company, that sort of thing. So when leaders buy into that and they develop people for that specific reason, they get tremendous buy-in from the people because it ain't about the work. It's about helping them have a better life. But the Toyota Way started it. And then again, fast forward about 3 years, and that I finally listened to that 1 hour audio the quality technician gave me in 2005. 2008, I had resigned, started my own company, a lean manufacturing company, and I was driving around and had my iPod plugged into my stereo, listening to music. Back them days, man, I had a Corvette Z06 long tube headers, and I mean, things sound like a NASCAR, and I had a big fancy
Oh,
stereo system. So I'm cruising around. Didn't have any clients yet, because when I resigned, I didn't have a business. I didn't have a business name. I didn't have a client. I didn't
you
know
had
how
a
to.
you had a Corvette and some wind to get.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was cruising around, man, looking for some work and meeting people. But anyway, I had my iPod plugged in, across the stereo. The song was listed on there so I could see what was playing. All of a sudden, a dude started talking. I'm like, what is this? And looked at the stereo, and it said 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I'm like, that's that business book Zach gave me. That's what he called it when he gave it to me. He said it was a business book. And I was thinking, I was about to turn it off. I said, well, I'm starting my own business. I don't have any. It's a business book. Maybe I should listen to it. And so I just let it play. And what I actually had was a 1 hour highlight of the entire book. I didn't know there was a book though at that time. I thought,
Yeah.
I listened to that thing like 1,000 times. I thought it was the only thing like that on the earth, but it was just a highlight of the 7 habits in general. And so I let it play. I was listening to it.
Was it narrated by Stephen Covey?
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
awesome.
And I mean, I can hear his voice now. I can always hear it. I mean, it's still the number one book that I've ever read out of hundreds of books and
Yeah.
thousands of hours of audios and videos. It changed my life the most. And pretty quick into that, he said the most important thing I ever learned was between stimulus and response, human beings have the freedom to choose their response. And I grew up with a short temper like you can't imagine. It was ugly, and it was still ugly that day when I was listening to it. It didn't come out as much, but I still had that issue. And I don't have it anymore. I started working on it that day. I probably got it wrong for the next 1,000 times it happened. I probably got angry, but every single time I thought about it, I could choose my response. And it's got to be based on values, not emotions. My response was usually based on emotions. But by that point, I was starting to figure out I got to start my own business. I got to be better. I can't be an idiot. We used to say, my family always said, short temper runs in the family. But shortly after I let that play, I rewound and listened to that one segment 6 or 7 times before I ever let it go past. It was like a profound thought. I never thought I could choose my response. I just thought I was
Wired that way.
programmed, wired to
Yeah.
to be angry. I mean, everybody in my family says that short temper runs in the family. But finally, I let it play, and he says, when you can choose your response, it means you're response able. And when I'm doing it visually, I was listening to him, on audio, but I could hear him doing what I'm doing, holding his hands up. Says me, we're response able. And then he said that means we're responsible. And he slid his hands together, them two words together, response able, put them together, and we're responsible. And as soon as that happened, I just hit pause and I thought about it, and it just resonated that my family short temper doesn't run in my family. Irresponsibility runs in my family. And so I got to work and started, first of all, fixing that about me. And then I learned all kind of other stuff. Later on, when I was listening to it, he said something before that I missed the first time, but it stuck pretty quick. Maybe even the second time I listened to it, he said, if you truly want to learn this content, you got to start teaching to someone else within 24 to 48 hours. And so if you read my Kaizen book, you'll see that's what I did with my Kaizen teams. I started talking about it at home to my family and my mother, anybody who would listen, and my wife. But I instantly integrated it in. The very next time I did a Kaizen event, I walked in. Normally, I would always start with the tools. When we did that transformation in my plant where I actually worked there, 3% to plus 35%, I didn't know anything about leadership. We come in on Monday morning, I start talking about lean tools, whichever one we were focused on. I start teaching them the competency of, how to go out and improve a process. But the very next time after I listened to that audio, I went in and I said, hey guys, first I had to build a little bit of a relationship with about 30 minutes. I said, hey man, I listened to something recently. It's just an hour. I said, if y'all don't mind, I'd like y'all to be guinea pigs. You don't even know what's coming. I said, I'm going to put this CD in my computer. I'm going to let it play for an hour. If y'all agree, we just going to sit here. When we get done, I'm going to stop it and we're going to talk about it. And you'll decide if I ever play it again for anybody else. And is it just something I'm interested in, or is it something that we all may be interested in? Because I've never heard anything like it. And so I hit play. I didn't say a word. We got done, and it was a tremendous conversation, but there was unanimous consent to everybody needs to hear this from now on. So I just started integrating it. But the next time I played it, I paused it, talked a little bit about that between stimulus and response. And then I let it play. Fast forward, 8 years, I play it about 10 seconds and I talk about 10 minutes and that sort of thing. So that's really, and I was talking about all the other books that I was reading as well. I would sprinkle it in. So that's Dr. Covey, without a doubt. That's my number one book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah.
He wrote another book, The 8th Habit, which is finding your voice and inspiring others to find theirs. And that one, when I read it, I was like, he wrote that for me. It was a while before I read that one because I didn't know there was any books. And then his son wrote a book called The Speed of Trust. Stephen M.R. Covey wrote The Speed of Trust. That's my number 3 book. And sandwiched between those two are The 5 Levels of Leadership by John Maxwell. I mean, it explains. Have you ever read The 5 Levels by chance?
I actually have it right here. It's on my long list of books to actually read, but yeah, I haven't yet.
So if you read it, or if anybody listening has read it, when you go through them 5 levels, what I see and understand about Toyota, they're like the strongest level 3 that they can be, which is phenomenal. Most people don't ever make it to level 3, which is where people follow you because they want to, and for the results you get for the team and the organization. And level 4, though, is all about people development. And people follow you at that level because of what you've done for them personally. You got a relationship for them personally. Just like on a very tiny scale, just like you invite me to be on this podcast. I'm on here for you. You might think I'm on here for me, but I'm on here for you because you asked me to, and I got to meet you for a minute and I could figure out what you do. And I want to help you be successful. I have no idea what that means. I assume it's based on the questions you asked me, and I try to do a good job answering them for you and for your audience. It's just a small role I get to play in your big picture today. But that book right there, man, that's
finding your voice and serving impact and understanding, as you're talking right now, and I'm in the lean mindset, based on the premise of this conversation, what I'm realizing is like that principle in lean of go, look, see, like go to where the work is being done. That is also extremely true when we're talking about between your ears. You know what I mean? Like go look, see how you think about things. Think about how you study things. Think about your impacts in the world and use some of these models in order to grow that impact or make positive changes. So like, I don't know. I can't help but try to keep tying things back to lean, but I like go look, see for this.
And I know that's what you keep asking me, lean, and I keep talking about leadership, but in my mind, it's still the same thing. It's just the foundational layer, like what you just said. And in my Kaizen book, I have a chapter on that. I quote Jim Womack. You know all about Jim.
Yep.
But one of his quotes, he said the same thing you're saying. He just said it slightly different, but I use it as a chapter title, I think, or a subtitle. I give him credit in the book, but he says, go see, ask why, demonstrate respect. And the, if you don't know how to lead yourself well and lead others, you can't demonstrate respect. You can go see and you can ask why, but you miss the whole component, which is demonstrate respect. Because a lot of leaders, they don't know. They're the boss. They busy. They load it up, and when they go see and ask why, a lot of times even asking why offends somebody. And in my lean events, I would always teach them the lesson, and I would teach it this way because I want the team to know why I'm asking why, and then I want them when we go out to the shop floor, to the gemba, so to speak, where the actual work happens, is what that means, right? So I want my team that I'm leading, when they go out, I want them to demonstrate respect, and I want them to teach people this same lesson. I would tell them, when you go out, before you start teaching, teach them this lesson on why. And so when I would teach the team, I would ask them, I would say, if a 5-year-old boy or girl, kid walked up and saw you doing something, and they ask you why you're doing it, why would you think they're asking you that question? And they would say, because they want to learn. I said, exactly. I said, well, what if the boss walks up and asks you a question of why you're doing something that you're doing? Why would you think the boss is asking you why? They'd say, because they think I'm doing it wrong, or I shouldn't be doing it. And I said, well, I want y'all to know, when I ask you why, I'm 5 years old.
Oh, wow.
I just want to know why. I don't want to know why to blame you or to question you literally about why you're doing it. I want to know why you're doing it. Like, why? Like, so I teach them that. And then it's cool when we'd go out to the floor, you hear them talking about the 5-year-old and the boss, because they understood it. They understood it just so simply. Like you said, a lot of people tell me I make things simple, but I want people to understand it. That's why I make it simple. I ain't trying to impress somebody. I'm trying to inspire somebody.
I've got I'm a consultant, as a lot of people know. I use a lot more words to try to describe that. What you just described right there, I'm likely going to steal that from you.
I hope you do, man. It gives results.
And because I sit there and I'm just like, hey, I'm here. I'm not here to pass judgment and all this other thing. I'm just trying to understand. I'm just working with you to understand. But being able to say, like, treat me like I'm 5, like I'm genuinely curious, like I'm learning about the world. That's what I am doing. I have to come up to speed. I'm not trying to say that you've done anything wrong. I haven't even made my assessment. I don't know what's right and wrong. Like, I'm just curious. And that's a beautiful way to put it, because I think a lot of people feel like their leadership is critical through that lens of second guessing the things that they're doing, by nature of what management is. And I think if management defined right, obviously that's the way, the things that you're writing about in your books is like how to do this correctly, how to inspire and motivate people, how to put them on a proactive path of communication as opposed to a defensive path of working, and getting the best out of them.
Yep. And it's a principle. It's a principle of connecting, not communicating. It's easy to communicate. You just tell them some stuff, but connecting, that's a whole different level. And that's where you get the buy-in and the sustaining, but you got to paint them a picture. See, when you tell somebody, if I tell you how to be, you're going to listen like this. You don't know me. Who are you? Up. Especially if I already don't trust you. And most consultants, when you walk in the room, they already don't trust you for a lot of reasons, a lot of valid reasons sometimes. As soon as you tell them a story, though, they put their hands behind their ears, figuratively, not literally.
Yeah.
The subconscious mind listens to that story as there's something that applies to me. Like when I tell the 5-year-old and the boss story, it's got nothing to do with them. It's just safe, but it paints them a picture, and they already understand both things, but they haven't tied it to this thing. And so when I tell them these two things, they already know both. I mean, they're the ones that answered the question. They already knew, right? Yeah. See, again, I'm leading with questions, not directions. I'm painting them a picture, then I ask them a question. Why does the 5-year-old want to know? I didn't tell them why the 5-year-old wanted to know. They told me. I didn't tell them why the boss wanted to know. I asked them, why does the boss want to know? They told me. And a lot of people ask me, Mack, how do you get people to think for themselves? And I say, stop answering their questions. It's that easy. You want somebody to think for themselves, stop answering their question. Because when you answer the question, you're thinking for them. You want them to answer a question. If you're a high impact leader, you got to know some good questions to ask them, because that's what you do. You answer their question with a question.
I love that. And to your point earlier, there are a lot of bad consultants out there. And when I say bad, I mean, there's a lot of smart people that go into consulting, but to truly be interested in the impacts of the changes that are being made to the people, and to truly push the power structure in a way that allows success, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hard work. I mean, you do have to do a knowledge transfer of perspective to leaders and a knowledge transfer of the tools and perspective to employees. And those are different experiences, which it sounds like, which is the designation that you made, or at least the awareness that you had. So you've evolved, man. You've evolved from a frontline employee to somebody who's doing lean specifically, to somebody who's doing leadership and blending in some process improvement principles. You've written a slew of books. What are you up to now, man? What's the thing that's most interested you? What are you evolving to?
Just more of the same, I think. I mean,
Okay.
like right now, I hadn't written a book in a few years. Before I figured out I needed some books, so I wrote a lot of books. I had a lot of knowledge, and then I figured out having the books was not preventing me from going where I wanted to do. So I had to figure out, I focused a lot on connecting. Most people know me through LinkedIn. I put out something every day. I got a podcast too, and I put out a lot of content. But I think it's more of the same. I just got an order yesterday for a couple hundred books for Vancouver, Canada. Those folks have been doing book studies on their own, and it may be more international stuff. I can't, I always tell people when you grow, you just keep growing, and you can't see where you're going until you move a little farther. Like if you pull out your driveway at night, turn your headlights on, you can't see 2 miles down the road. You got to start moving before you can see 100 yards down the road, right? But as you move, you start to see different things. So, I mean, I'm mainly focused on just growing and getting out and doing more of the same. I mean, to me, I always tell people when you're trying to find your purpose, it's kind of like you start out at the top of a funnel. You'll bounce around anywhere. You'll do anything that kind of fits. And as you start honing in on your purpose, I say you follow your passion to find your purpose. And, and that's where I moved down into lean, and I was further down in the funnel. It was tighter. That's why I left the company. They were trying to make me a plant manager, and I didn't want to be a plant manager. I wanted to do lean. I had went further down in the funnel and found my passion for lean. But then the next 4 years when I was doing lean, I went further down in the funnel and found my passion for growing and developing people so that they can do lean effectively or whatever else they want to do in life effectively. And so I'm pretty close down in the bottom of that funnel with my purpose, but I know from living growth that there could be something out there that I don't see right now. I have no idea what, John Maxwell, when he started, he was a pastor of a church. Today he's meeting with presidents of countries. And Rhea and I got to go down in 2013 to Guatemala and kick off cultural transformation with John Maxwell and 150 other people like us. And
that was huge. I've read about that. That was a huge event. There was tens of thousands of people there.
Yeah, well, they were not at the event. There was 150 of us here, and then we went out and trained 20,000 people, leaders all over the place, 50 people at a time. Each one of us would have a group of 50, and we'd all have 50 at the same time, but somewhere else, within Guatemala City most of the time. Sometimes people went out to other places, but mainly the leaders come to the city, and we were all scattered around the city. It's a pretty big city, but he's done that in Dominican Republic. He just finished doing that. He was in Paraguay. I think the next place is Costa Rica, but he could never see that. There's a lot of growth between pastor and then you're meeting with presidents. We got to go to the presidential palace in Guatemala with John and the president. Those two were on TV. We were kind of in the audience, and they were cascading transformation for the entire nation out to the people. So wow. I don't know. One day I could be doing that. I got to speak at Yale University in 2018 at the Yale School of Management. I never saw that coming. I haven't done any of this on purpose to, I didn't ever have a plan. Like, I got to see what I can do to get to speak at Yale. When I got asked to do that, I was like, I don't even know what state Yale was in. I had to get on Google and do a Google search, see where I was going. I didn't even have any idea.
What state is Yale in? I don't
Connecticut.
Oh, is that?
I didn't know though. It's up New Haven, Connecticut. They got some awesome pizza.
That's
man.
Right. That's right. I think I've heard that before, but yeah, if that was on a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire question, I would have phoned a friend on that one for sure.
I had no idea, but I'm telling you, man, they got a phenomenally beautiful, it's off the charts university. We got to speak to a paving company in Princeton, New Jersey, and we walked around the Princeton campus. Those campuses, those buildings, they're amazing.
Yeah, and in the history there too. I mean, those are institutions older than I think the United States in a lot of ways, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I don't remember when they started, but they some of the original
for sure
buildings here. There's no doubt about that.
So also, I love the name of your company. It's pretty intuitive, Blue Collar Leadership. Talk about that name for a minute. Like, why did you go with that name, and what's it mean to you?
Yeah, part of it is, the actual name of our company's Top Story Leadership. People don't know that because we don't really talk about that too much. But Blue Collar Leadership to me is kind of a brand, but people think it is my business name, and maybe
Yeah,
it should have been, but I didn't know that then, right? I grew past it, but I did it because I want people to know when they see my books or my brand, and when I say people, I mean blue collar people, whether they're on the front lines or whether they work their way up or whether they own a company now. I mean, it doesn't matter. It ain't about the title, it's about the mindset kind of thing, who we are. And so I wanted people to know this brand. I'm looking wrong side of my shirt over here. This brand is for you. Like I tell people sometimes when I'm speaking at a conference, like you saw me speak at, I'd say you probably could put out my top 3 books that I told you a minute ago. You could lay one of my blue collar leadership books down beside it, and you could introduce it to people who've never heard of leadership. You could say, "Hey, I got 4 books up here. Come by. Here's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, written by a PhD educator. Here's Speed of Trust, written by a guy off of Wall Street, and here's 5 Levels of Leadership, written by a pastor. And then here's a book that's a 1/4 inch as thick as those other 3 books, and it's got blue collar leadership on the cover, and it's written by a guy who started on the front lines. First 10 years was a factory worker operating CNC lathes, mills and drills, blah blah blah, and tell them the story. And which book would you want to pick up? Probably almost all of them would pick up my book, but what
yeah.
they would learn when they read my book was they need to read these other 3 books too.
That's it. That thin edge of the wedge, man. It's to open up a dialogue, right? And you're
It's a
distilling
bridge.
things. Yeah, you're distilling things down in a way where it's applicable to where people are in their life or what they identify as of what they do. Like some people don't want to be these corporate executives. Some people, they just work every day and they want to have a good time at work.
Yep. And what I found, as I started growing and learning, the first time I heard somebody speak in person, like you heard me speak, it was John Maxwell. And I had paid $5,000 to sit in that room. And that's how much I had grown. And what I realized though was the majority of people in that room were white collar
Yeah.
executives. Most of them didn't pull money out of their own wallet to be there like I did. Most of them had a corporate account or a corporate credit card. The company paid for them to be there, and they may not have even cared. But I quickly realized that how come I worked in multi-billion-dollar companies for 20 years? I ain't never heard this stuff. And then I started realizing ain't hardly any of us heard this stuff. It's like, well, I'm going to be the guy that goes out and gives all of us some of what everybody else that's been highly successful has been having, and we can apply it in our lives in our blue collar way. And I teach the same principles in my book that they teach to CEOs of multi-billion-dollar companies, but I tell a different story. I tell a story that relates to what I call the regular people. I'm still one of them. I'll always be one of them. And a lot of leaders in blue collar companies, they say, "Oh, our people, they won't read books. They don't want to read books," until they get the books, and then they find out people do want to read the books. Not everybody, but I talked to the lady yesterday from Vancouver, Canada. They had started doing the book studies, and she told me she was so excited. Her name's Allison. She's like, "I'm so excited. I'm so glad that Gary, the leader there, started doing these book studies." She said, "I was just a receptionist when I started here, and he believed in me, and now I'm a salesperson. I never thought I'd be a salesperson. She was 34. She said, I thought I'd be working at McDonald's my whole life. That's who I was and where I come
Wow.
from." And she may not have believed me, but I was telling her she's one of the 10 or 15 people that I've met since 2012 who gets this stuff kind of like I got it when I first heard it. I mean, it resonates with her. I said, "You don't have to go do anything else in your career, but keep reading these books. The rest of it will take care of itself. You'll be the most phenomenal salesperson, or you'll go wherever it is you want to go and do whatever you want to do." And that's what I mean. People is so phenomenal of a impact on people that are hungry for this stuff, and they're out there. They may be driving a forklift, they may be under a welding hood, they may be in an ER. In your case,
Yeah.
they may be just getting started, a LP, what is it, LPA, an assistant,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
entry
Yeah. Sure.
level
Yeah.
for the
Absolutely.
hospitals. Ria worked in the hospital industry, in administration in hospitals, so I got to know a little of the language, but not much. But
Yeah.
the people usually on the entry level part of the organization, if you want to call it the bottom of the org chart, although they're not on the org chart, they're like below the org chart if you want to talk about the org chart. But those people are the hungriest. They they're hungry. Not all of them are hungry, but that's where the hungriest people reside, are down at the bottom of the org chart.
Mac, man, this has been a fun conversation with you. An hour goes by so quickly.
So I'm looking at the clock like, what?
Yeah, talking about this kind of stuff, man. Hey, I want you to let people know again where to find you, where the best place to connect with you is, and then obviously where to go to start getting some of this knowledge. Just this, obviously fantastic books, and then also you're out there speaking, you're out there making impact and change. How do we connect with you?
Yeah, bluecollarleadership.com is the best place to go. My cell phone number is at the top. I give it to you right now. It's 334-728-4143. Some people say, why you put your cell phone number out everywhere? I was like, I want people to call me. That's why. So they need to know.
Of course.
But it's funny, hardly anybody ever calls. But I'll tell you listeners, you're talking about the books. You have to type this in to get it. But if you go to bluecollarleadership.com / the word download, DOWNLOAD, you can actually read the first 5 chapters of all these blue collar books. You can read excerpts from all of my other books. There's a link to read excerpts from Ria's books, and you don't have to put in an email address. There's no spamming. There's no subscribing.
What?
You read it right there. If you want to download the PDF so you can share it with somebody, you can do that. I don't believe in spamming people. I don't like to be added to an email list. I don't like all that. But that's what the world coaches everybody else to do. But I don't like it, so I don't do it to somebody else. People say, how you get business if you don't do all that? I answer my phone and I answer an email that somebody sent me. I just got one a minute ago from Texas, and that's how I do. I just add value. I do stuff like this. So, that's what I would recommend. And we got a special offer. It's changing for 2022. It's going to be anybody who purchases 300 books. That's $5,400. You get the 300 books, and we cover all our expenses, travel to any of the 50 states, and basically speak for free. Although I had to spend a lot of Ria's money to travel all over the country, so it really ain't speaking for free. We pay to come speak, because what we tell leaders is, if you'll invest in your people, we'll invest in your people. And what I mean invest is give them the book. And again, one reason I do that is because Zach gave me that audio, and it was very powerful. Like the guy that called me a minute ago, he wants me to come talk to like 6 or 8 people. It's at a power plant in Texas. That's all the people that work there, 6 or 8. And he says, do I still need all those books? I don't have that many people. I said, we got 32 books. We can give you a kit for everybody.
Yeah.
And if you got 10 people, that's 320 books. But and then you decide what to do with them. But we'll come speak for 2 hours, and you'll have books to go out and do book studies with for years if you want to grow and develop your people. So that's our main thing that keeps us busy. Like I said, we've been in 40 states doing that special offer like that.
Well, Mac, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast, my man. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, wisdom acquired over years of going out and doing the work and sitting beside people and kind of understanding what it really takes to help organizations transform and change. Again, that's bluecollarleadership.com. It's Mack Story. And I'm excited. I got your wife coming on the podcast too in a couple of weeks. And
everybody's going to find out. She's a rock star. I'm the backup singer.
Oh yeah. I cannot wait to collaborate with her as well. So again, man, best to you, safe travels. And thanks for sharing an hour with me, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for what you're doing, Jake. Don't stop, man. Don't let off the gas.
I appreciate you.